Good mythical afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Ayala with another video lecture for you. This is 6-1, or whatever unit and number it is for this year. Articles of the Confederation and a new U.S. Constitution. So please be aware that you are listening to the information being presented. Yes, that means not to be listening to other items and to be writing down the information so that you can be successful on the next unit test or whenever I quiz you or ask for this information. So as always, please sit back, relax, and let's get some learning done. So the first thing to start off with is this idea of what we call the Northwest Ordinance. So what ends up happening is after the American Revolution, what is now the United States gains a whole bunch of land in what we would call our Northwest Territory region, which is like where Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana will develop later. The Northwest Ordinance puts some things into place. The first thing is that new states' governments are required to become all Republican forms of governments, just like how we were under the Articles, and still are under the U.S. Constitution. And it was organized by what we call the Land Ordinance of 1785. So from there, in 1787, the Congress under the Articles creates the Northwest Ordinance in 1787, which told how these new territories would be governed and how they could become states. So more or less what it stated was like you must have a capital, set number of population in your state, and you must have a written constitution and Republican form of government. Those are the major points that you need to know. So what happens is that this new government, as aforementioned earlier, was under this idea, or under our first form of government known as the Articles of Confederation, or as we call it, we just call it the Articles. So the new Articles, the Articles of Confederation was created a very weak national government because we feared tyranny from living under British rule. I mean, why would the new United States create a government that could become tyrannical after we just fought a war about a tyrannical government? That makes no sense. So we're going to try to make this government as weak as possible. And so most of the powers are ended up given to the states. So not the national government. The national government actually had very little power. So for example, all the national government could do was they had the powers to wage war, make money, and sign treaties, and that's really about it. Really not much. So, though the biggest issue were the weaknesses. So, for example, they couldn't levy taxes. So, if the Articles of Confederation, if the national government needed to, let's say, try to build a road, it had to ask the states for money, which would be a major issue because why would a state want to give the national government money unless it had to? It lacked the power to enforce laws. There was no executive branch. It lacked the power to regulate trade, which is yet again part of the executive branch. It didn't have a judicial branch either, so there's only one branch of government, which was the legislative. And it required all 13 states to approve any changes. I mean, imagine that. Even just in our own classroom, if we tried to make an agreement, we're going to have, not everyone's going to agree on the same idea. There's going to be constant bickering going back and forth, and nothing's ever going to get done. So what happens is we get to Shay's Rebellion. So the farmers who fought during the American Revolutionary War want debt relief because their farms are being taken by the banks. And the legislature says no, because they're like, we can't give you debt relief. We have no money to give you debt relief. We can't even pay you your money that we owe you from the war. And so this becomes a major issue. So Shay, in January 1787, led a rebellion of farmers against the militia, and ends up failing. And the only reason this fails is not because the national government were able to protect themselves, but because the militias came out. The state militias themselves came out to have to crush this. And this showed the weakness, because if we could be almost overthrown by a group of farmers, there's a major issue. And we got to be aware of that. And that is now the end of 6-1. And as always, don't forget to be awesome.